Did aliens and robots completely dominate 1970s television? While Star Wars revolutionized sci-fi on the big screen in 1977, television was quietly creating its own revolution with wildly experimental shows. Most viewers have no idea that 70s TV gave us more boundary-pushing sci-fi concepts than the last 20 years combined. Let's dive in. Space, 1999, 1975 to 1977. Britain's answer to Star Trek featured the moon getting literally blasted out of Earth's orbit by a nuclear waste explosion. This insane premise gave us TV's most expensive sci-fi show at the time, costing a jaw-dropping $300,000 per episode. That's $1.6 million in today's money spent on practical effects that still look stunning. The series follows Moonbase Alpha's 311 personnel as they hurtle uncontrollably through space, encountering alien civilizations weekly. Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, fresh off their mission, impossible fame, brought serious acting chops to what could have been cheesy material. What makes Space 1999 special is its unrelenting bleakness. Unlike Star Trek's optimism, these stranded humans face constant existential dread with dwindling resources and no way home. The show's iconic Eagle spacecraft became so beloved that they're still among the most collected sci-fi toys ever made. Though canceled after 2 seasons, the show inspired a rabid cult following that continues today. Legendary film critic Pauline Kael called it the best science fiction series ever put on television, while Isaac Asimov famously complained about its scientific inaccuracies before becoming a reluctant fan of its philosophical depth. Space. 1999 walked so Battlestar Galactica could run. The $6 Million Man, 1973 to 1978. We can rebuild him. We have the technology. Those words launched not just a cultural phenomenon, but television's first successful transhumanist exploration. Steve Austin, astronaut-turned-cyborg government agent, brought superhuman abilities to prime time before Marvel made it cool. After a devastating crash, Austin receives bionic legs capable of 60-mile-per-hour sprints, a bionic arm with the strength of a bulldozer, and a bionic eye with zoom capabilities. The government's $6 million investment gives them a super spy who battles everything from domestic terrorists to Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot. The show featured a recurring bionic Sasquatch played by Andre the Giant and later Ted Cassidy. Lee Majors' stoic performance made Austin an unlikely sex symbol despite the show's family-friendly format. The famous slow-motion running effect wasn't initially a creative choice, but a necessity born from budget constraints. They couldn't afford to show him running at full speed, so they slowed the film down and added that iconic na-na-na-na sound effect. The show spawned a successful spin-off, The Bionic Woman, making it one of television's first shared universes. At its peak, over 30 million viewers tuned in weekly, equivalent to 100 million in today's fragmented media landscape. Battlestar Galactica, 1778 to 1779. Before Ronald D. Moore reimagined it for the 2000s, the original Battlestar Galactica delivered a space opera so epic that ABC spent $7 million on the pilot alone. The network was so desperate to cash in on Star Wars fever that they essentially created a movie-quality show that bankrupted itself with its ambition. The premise feels eerily relevant today. Humanity's 12 colonies are obliterated in a surprise attack by the mechanized Cylons, leaving only a ragtag fleet of civilian ships protected by the last military vessel, the Battlestar Galactica. Sound familiar? The show pioneered the humans-on-the-run trope that sci-fi would mine for decades to come. What's wild is that 20th Century Fox actually sued Universal for plagiarizing Star Wars, despite Galactica creator Glenn A. Larson developing the concept years earlier. The lawsuit got thrown out, but the legal fees contributed to the show's financial troubles. Despite lasting only 1 season, Galactica inspired fierce loyalty. When ABC canceled it, fans organized one of television's first major letter-writing campaigns, sending over 250,000 complaints. The effects team repurposed many of the show's models for later sci-fi films, and eagle-eyed viewers can spot Cylon Raiders and Colonial Vipers in numerous B-movies throughout the 80s. Blake's 7, 1978 to 1981. The BBC created this dark, morally complex space rebellion drama as their answer to Star Wars, but instead of heroic Jedi, we got a crew of criminals, terrorists, and murderers fighting against a fascist federation. Blake's 7 makes The Mandalorian look like a Disney cartoon, which it technically is. Raj Blake, a political dissident with memory gaps from Federation brainwashing, gathers 6 fellow outcasts aboard a stolen alien ship called the Liberator. What made the show revolutionary was that our heroes frequently lost, betrayed each other, and sometimes behaved worse than the totalitarian regime they fought against. The Federation's most iconic villain, Supreme Commander Servalan, broke every gender stereotype of the era as a power-hungry, sexually dominant female antagonist who frequently outmaneuvered Blake's crew. The BBC's minuscule budget created hilariously obvious limitations. The same 6 extras died in different costumes each episode, and alien planets suspiciously resembled British quarries. Yet these constraints forced the writers to focus on complex moral dilemmas and character development instead of flashy effects. The series finale remains one of the most shocking endings in television history, with a body count that would make Game of Thrones blush. When asked years later why he made such a depressing ending, creator Terry Nation replied, "Because happy endings are for children and fools." The Incredible Hulk, 1977 to 1982. Before Marvel dominated global cinema, Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno delivered the most human superhero adaptation ever made. Forget CGI monsters. The Incredible Hulk gave us a bodybuilder painted green who somehow managed to break our hearts every single episode. Dr. David Banner, a scientist grieving his wife's death, overdoses himself with gamma radiation while researching human strength. When angered, he transforms into a green behemoth with childlike emotions and uncontrollable strength. Pursued by a persistent journalist who believes the Hulk is a murderer, Banner wanders America like a green kung fu, helping strangers while searching for a cure. What made this show transcend its pulpy comic origins was the profound loneliness at its core. The iconic closing scene of Bixby hitchhiking on an empty road became a cultural touchstone, accompanied by The Lonely Man, piano theme that still triggers instant emotion. Creator Kenneth Johnson fought Marvel to eliminate comic book trappings like purple pants and speech bubbles. When Lou Ferrigno auditioned for the Hulk role, he was competing against Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was rejected for being too short. The green makeup took 3 hours to apply and frequently gave Ferrigno skin infections. The show won 3 Emmy Awards, unheard of for superhero adaptations at the time. UFO, 1970 to 1971. Jerry Anderson ditched the puppets of Thunderbirds for real actors in this adults-only sci-fi thriller about a secret organization defending Earth from organ-harvesting aliens. Set in the far future of 1980, UFO featured purple-haired moon base operators, submarine aircraft carriers, and more sexual politics than you'd expect from 1970. The series centers on Shado, Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization, a covert military group led by the ruthlessly dedicated Ed Straker. These aliens aren't coming in peace. They're harvesting human organs to extend their dying race's lifespan. The show tackled issues most sci-fi wouldn't touch: drug use, marital breakdown, and the psychological toll of constant vigilance against invasion. The production design remains influential decades later. The moon base's spherical helmets and silver catsuits inspired countless fashion shoots, while the Interceptor spacecraft with their single nuclear missile design showed up in everything from Star Wars to Battlestar Galactica. Anderson invested heavily in detailed miniature work that stands up remarkably well today. The show's adult themes caused scheduling nightmares, with some stations airing it in prime time and others relegating it to late night. This inconsistent scheduling contributed to its premature cancellation after 26 episodes. Despite its short run, UFO's influence extends to The X-Files and beyond, as perhaps the first show to treat alien invasion as a gritty, realistic military problem rather than a fantastical adventure. Star Trek, the Animated Series, 1973 to 1974. When NBC canceled the original Star Trek, nobody expected the Enterprise crew would return just 4 years later in cartoon form with most of the original cast voicing their characters. Even more surprising? This kiddie version delivered some of the franchise's most conceptually daring stories. Free from the budget constraints of live action, the animated Enterprise encountered city-sized space amoebas, time paradox planets, and sentient clouds that would have been impossible in the original series. The animation allowed for truly alien crew members like Lieutenant Erix, a tripedal navigator with 3 arms, and Mress, a feline communications officer. The show maintained Trek's progressive ethos, becoming one of the first cartoons to feature a racially diverse cast. Behind the scenes, Leonard Nimoy leveraged his star power for good, refusing to participate unless Nichelle Nichols and George Takei were hired to voice their original characters rather than having white actors replace them. The show won Star Trek's first Emmy Award in 1975, yet it remained largely forgotten until recently. Gene Roddenberry later tried to declare the series non-canonical when elements contradicted later live-action productions, but fans rebelled. Many episodes were written by acclaimed science fiction authors like Larry Niven, who contributed his known space universe to the Trek mythology. These 22 episodes served as the only new Trek content for a decade until the motion picture finally arrived in 1979. Colchack The Nightstalker, 1974 to 1975. Before The X-Files, before Supernatural, before Buffy, there was Carl Kolchak, a rumpled reporter in a cheap seersucker suit, fighting vampires, werewolves, and aliens armed with nothing but his wits and a flashbulb camera. This show crawled so others could run. Darren McGavin stars as the titular Nightstalker, a newspaper reporter who stumbles onto supernatural cases that authorities refuse to acknowledge. Each week brought a new monster pulled from global mythology, but the real villain was always the establishment that gaslighted Kolchak and suppressed the truth. The formula sounds familiar because Chris Carter created The X-Files specifically as a tribute to Kolchak, even casting McGavin in a guest role. The show's greatest strength was its Chicago location shooting, giving it a gritty documentary feel unlike anything else on television. Despite impressive ratings, ABC canceled it after 1 season because McGavin wanted out, exhausted by the grueling schedule. The series began as 2 TV movies that were so successful that the second film, The Night Strangler, became the highest-rated TV movie of all time when it aired. Stephen King cites Kolchak as a major influence, particularly on his novel Salem's Lot. When the series was released on DVD in 2005, it outsold contemporary shows despite being 30 years old, proving Kolchak's staying power across generations of horror fans. Survivors, 1975 to 1977. Decades before The Walking Dead, this BBC drama imagined a post-apocalyptic Britain where 95% of humanity has been wiped out by a laboratory-created superflu. There are no zombies, no aliens, just traumatized humans trying to rebuild civilization from scratch. The series begins with the pandemic's rapid spread, focusing on Abby Grant, a middle-class housewife who survives and searches for her son while gathering a community of fellow survivors. What makes Survivors revolutionary is its unflinching look at how quickly societal systems collapse. Episodes deal with the practical challenges of post-apocalyptic life. Food production, medicine without pharmaceuticals, and the ethical dilemmas of creating new governance systems. Created by Terry Nation, the same genius behind Blake's Seven and Doctor Who's Daleks, the show divided audiences with its pessimistic view of human nature. The BBC received numerous complaints about its darkness, particularly a controversial episode where the survivors debate executing a murderer. The show's first season depicts a smallpox epidemic with such realism that health authorities consulted the production team during actual disease outbreaks years later. When the BBC remade Survivors in 2008, they discovered Nation's original vision was so prescient that little needed updating. During the COVID-19 pandemic, streaming of both versions surged by over 400% as viewers found the show's scenarios eerily predictive. Doctor Who, 1970 to 1979. The 70s completely reinvented Doctor Who, taking a fading black-and-white children's show and transforming it into a Technicolor phenomenon. The third Doctor, played by karate-chopping dandy Jon Pertwee, found himself exiled to Earth by his fellow Time Lords, forcing the show to reinvent itself with James Bond-style adventures. For the first time, the Doctor had to work within human institutions, becoming scientific advisor to UNIT, a military organization fighting alien threats. This era introduced iconic villains like the Master, the Doctor's nemesis Time Lord, and the Autons, killer mannequins that traumatized a generation of British children by making shop window dummies come to life. When Pertwee departed in 1974, the show reinvented itself again with Tom Baker's Bohemian Fourth Doctor, whose 7-year tenure remains the longest and most beloved. The show's tiny budget created infamously wobbly sets and monsters made of bubble wrap, yet these limitations pushed creative storytelling that addressed issues like environmentalism, fascism, and corporate greed. Producer Philip Hinchcliffe deliberately pushed the horror element so far that moral crusader Mary Whitehouse launched a national campaign against the show, claiming it was traumatizing children. The BBC eventually bowed to pressure and toned down the horror, but not before stories like The Deadly Assassin and Genesis of the Daleks redefined what was possible in family television. Baker's performance made him a national institution in Britain, with his trademark scarf becoming one of the most recognizable costume pieces in television history. Which of these classic 70s sci-fi shows was your favorite? Have you seen them all, or are there gems on this list you've never even heard of? Drop a comment below with your memories or questions about these groundbreaking series. While modern sci-fi dazzles us with fancy CGI and massive budgets, could today's algorithm-friendly shows ever match the raw creativity and risk-taking of these 70s classics? Or has corporate streaming permanently killed the experimental spirit that made these shows possible? Let me know your thoughts.